Welcome to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times, sponsored by MSA Safety. In this series, we bring you sessions from the Emergency Services Show and the Emergency Tech Show 2025. Austrian PPE manufacturer TEXPORT sponsored this year's Protecting the Protector stage. And in this episode, Catherine Levin finds out about their approach, innovations and the future of firefighting protective clothing. She is joined by Tim Wight from TEXPORT and Chris Colgan from Hunter Apparel.
I'm delighted to be joined by Tim Wight, who is a veteran of the fire industry with more than 35 years' experience, 25 of which have been focused specifically on firefighter PPE. He is a long-standing member of the FIA FRES Council, that's a lot of acronyms, and the PH14 committees, which may mean something to you if you're in that world, which oversees standards for firefighter protective clothing. He is now the Global PPE Sales Director for TEXPORT. Welcome.
Thank
Have
you.
I promoted you? Is that the right word?
You have promoted me, but that's fine.
Excellent.
So, TEXPORT.
So can I introduce Chris first? Is that
Oh,
okay?
sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Chris was the Assistant Chief Fire Officer and Director of Operations at Kent Fire and Rescue Service and retired in 2021. He also led for the National Fire Chiefs Council on PPE. Since then, he has established himself as a consultant and is working with Hunter Apparel, focused on decontamination. So welcome to you, Chris.
Thank you, Catherine.
So it's lovely to have you both here. Now, Tim, you were very keen then to tell us about TEXPORT. So let's do that first. Let's just get that out of the way. So tell us all about TEXPORT. So you're sponsoring the stage, your first time at the show?
No.
No?
No.
You personally or the firm? Do you tell me?
No, we've been at the show numerous times.
Oh, excellent. All right then.
So I could explain that a little bit.
Yes, please do.
So the company was founded in 1992 by Ottmar Schneider in Austria, in the lovely town of Salzburg. Family-run business. The business was founded specifically to produce and focus only on firefighter PPE and FR clothing. So it's its only focus. We own our own production, so we are the manufacturer. We're a European company, of course, but our manufacturing is also European. So our position and our supply chains are close. We have over 700 employees. We work through over 78 different distributors and agents around the world. And we have a presence in approximately 46, maybe more countries around the world. It's probably fair to say that our product is extremely well known globally. Maybe to some in the UK Fire Service, it might be a revelation, but it's not. We've been here for a while, so we've come to the ES show for many years now with our partner Hunter Apparel. And to put that into context, as a manufacturer, we work closely with our partners. So in the UK and Ireland, Hunter Apparel is our key distributor of our products. So I suppose that sort of sums up TEXPORT in a nutshell.
Okay, so you guys have been working together as a Hunter Apparel, but you're a consultant with Hunter Apparel with your Kent Fire Rescue Services of 30 years, no doubt.
That's right.
Working for them. How's that been transitioning from the fire service into the commercial world and having that consultant view on things?
Yeah, it's been really valuable. You do a lot of hindsight, a lot of looking back, going, did we really do that? And the thing I noticed most about retirement, and I'll say this to anyone that retires, the true benefit you get from retirement is a time to think.
Yes.
So I know people in the audience, they're probably juggling so many plates like I was, trying to deal with so many different conflicting priorities. And the one beauty of retirement is you can select that problem you want to solve and you can really work that problem and think it through. And so you find yourself going back, why didn't I see that then, that was a problem? But yeah, I've been working with Simon Hunter at Hunter Apparel since the pandemic, actually. We first met during the pandemic. and I was responsible for PPE in the fire service nationally. So we had to pivot and try and find medical grade PPE, and that's when my partnership with Simon grew. And then when I retired, we linked up again, and I've been working with him ever since. And that's how I come to meet the great company, family-run business that is TEXPORT. So it's really beneficial for me because I've gone from a public service to working for commercial organisations, but family-run commercial organisations, which they both are. And the benefit of that, and for anybody out there, is you get to talk to the people that make the decisions. You're not talking to shareholders or directors, you're talking to the business owners, and so you can get things done quickly. So it's been really fruitful in that respect.
Excellent. And so, Tim, you're talking about expanding your footprint into the UK in terms of British fire services using TEXPORT. And you've got this expertise from 30 years of Kent Fire and Rescue Service helping you with that in terms of your conversations. In terms of thinking about the session today, we talk about requirements and challenges. So the fire service in this country at the moment is looking very much at contaminants as an issue around firefighter PPE. So I wonder, Chris, just briefly from you, in terms of those 4 years since you left, have you seen the conversation change? Because I think I have, and I wonder what it looks like from your perspective now you're in the
Yeah, it definitely has changed. There's a lot more focus on it now. I remember the first time I really started to think about contaminants was probably 2015, when we was leading on the collaboration that is in place now around PPE. And I remember talking to Brett Egan, who's the technical lead. He worked for me at the time, and we're having this discussion about contaminants at that point. And it was weird because in the fire service, if you went to a chemical incident, you would have had well-defined protocols. You'd be upwind, stable ground, firm ground, decontamination zones, chemical protection suits, everything. You know, there was a lot of prescription that was applied to that type of incident. But up until that point, the same approach wasn't taken for house fires or general fires, carbonaceous fires. And so the topic started to raise its head, but there were no solutions. And I think when I've talked in the past, when I've done talks about retirement, when I look back, I say about the hindsight thing, when I look back, I was probably guilty of willful blindness, which was a term I came across, but didn't really understand what it meant. But it's a legal concept that basically says that if you avoid or ignore information that is readily available, then you're guilty of willful blindness. And I think I've been quite candid with my own performance in the past. I think, yeah, I was probably in that place because I was the national lead for PPE, but I knew about contaminants, but along with all of the other conflicting priorities I was dealing with, and I didn't have that time to think, I perhaps didn't give it the due attention that it deserved. So I think we've come a long way since then, and fire services have all got their contaminants groups, which is very good. So it's important to recognise where we've come from, but I still think there's a long way to go forward to actually bring about meaningful change. And I think we're still a long way short of that.
So Tim, in the UK with that conversation's going on, but you're bringing your voice from all over the world where you have your products. What does the contaminants conversation look like outside of the UK, and how will TEXPORT be able to come to the UK and help services to ensure that their PPE is able to deal with the contaminants, but also that whole process of going from red, amber, green within the fire station and all of the kind of new ways of working? So what does it look like from your point of view?
Globally speaking, can you hear me? The sound's gone dead. Globally speaking, the issue of contaminants is everywhere. So in North America, South America, Asia, Australia, Europe, of course. So it is the conversation that's being had. We're in its infancy when it comes to having the data to really understand what to do. So if you're looking at evidence-based decision making, we need more evidence to make good decisions about PPE. There are some things we know which we can approach, but there are different approaches to this issue in different markets. TEXPORT has a lot of knowledge on this topic. We do a lot of research, we do a lot of our own IP to understand this topic. But at this stage, it really is looking at the individual fire brigades all across Europe, South America and Asia, and the UK, to see exactly where the fire brigades themselves understand what they want or how to approach it. So it's not all PPE driven, this topic. Part of it is driven by the care and the maintenance and the, let's say, the hygiene practices of the fire brigades themselves. So it's a dynamic topic. So it's not something I can give you a definitive answer to today.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people talking about it. There are a lot of people doing studies and research. So until we have a direction of what to do, there's no point making changes to PPE based upon anecdote or a good feeling, or you need to have some evidence to say why you're doing something, will it work? The analogy I often put to people is that if you're talking about contaminants, does a teaspoon of cyanide, is it deadly, or is a pinhead of cyanide deadly? And the answer is both. So quantity matters. So when you're talking about how do you deal with different types of contamination, what do you do to reduce it? Do you reduce it within the PPE itself? Do you make modifications to the PPE? Or is there something external to that that you should be doing in order to reduce that? And we can only do that with evidence. And part of the evidence is collecting the statistics that directly relate to firefighter health.
Yes.
So.
And so when you're collecting that data, it's building, but you are having to make decisions about how you make garments, the material that you use, the coatings and all of that that goes into building the complexity of firefighter PPE. How do you know when to make the jump to make that decision process? Because you've got a production line, you've got a supply chain, you've got all of the things that go with that. How do you bring those two things together? It sounds like they're slightly in tension.
Well, it's not done in isolation. So a manufacturer does work with the end users, with the fire brigades, and so they drive. The fire brigades, the end users, the customers, should be the ones driving their need. And we're the ones that are then designing and addressing that need. So because if you look at the history of PPE in the last 20 years, there's new materials, new methods of making PPE that have come into the production cycle. And as we go forward, there'll be more new materials and so forth. But I think it's, without being very specific, it's very important to understand that this is the discussion and a partnership between the end user and the manufacturer. So what we do, we don't go off and do something in isolation. We do it because we recognize the need, and then there's an interaction with the end user.
Do you recognise that scenario in terms of that partnership that Tim talks about in terms of the services working with suppliers?
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually, because when I was in the service, the question I kept asking myself is, who drives the innovation? And sometimes you would get a supplier that would try and thrust upon you some innovation that you didn't require, or you didn't think you required it. But then if you treat it binary and just go one way or another, you don't get a good result. So I think it needs to be a blend of being clear as an end user about what your requirements are. And once you've established what your requirements are, how can they best be met? But rather than dictate, which happened in the past, services would get suppliers in and say, this is what we want. We know exactly how we want it. You're in a dangerous territory there of missing out on the innovation that the supplier or the manufacturers could provide you. So you don't want to go on to one end of this spectrum and just be at the behest of the supplier, but you also want to listen to them. So it's about how you balance.
It's a partnership, right?
A partnership. Your requirements with because they could actually turn around to you and say, yeah, what is it you're trying to achieve? Don't tell me what you want. Tell me what you're trying to achieve.
Yes.
What is the outcome? And I think that's, when I look back in my time, I was always in the service. I was always pushing and peddling. Let's be outcome focused.
Yeah.
Outcome focused. So this is what we want to achieve. Now, how can you help us achieve that? Because you might know of some innovation that could do it that we couldn't.
And that idea of partnership, Tim, then. So you're seeing that in the UK. Is there an environment which you can have that partnership? to have
Yeah.
those conversations.
Yes, I mean, we're right in the midst of a process at the moment. So,
But the National Fire Chief.
absolutely, everyone should be aware, if they aren't, that there is a National Fire Chief's procurement process that's
Yeah.
in play. So there has been a lot of engagement in the last couple of years with our company and other companies to the fire services in the UK. But out with the NFCC procurement, there is still engagement with fire services on all sorts of topics. It could be technical rescue, wildland firefighting. So although these things are also included in the NFC procurement, not everyone will be involved in that procurement. And there are, of course, fire brigades, such as airport fire, industrial fire, and smaller fire brigades associated with the UK that require an interaction to deal with their specific needs. So we can't work in isolation of our customers. That's clear.
Right. And so we've talked about partnership with fire rescue services, but there's also partnership between the industry itself. So the British Safety Industry Federation, for example, are speaking here tomorrow afternoon. We have them as our partner. Then they talk about standards a lot.
Yes.
So I wanted to pick up with that with you in terms of the conversation about the evolution and what it should be like. So how do you influence them from an industry's perspective? Because in your intro, Tim, I talked about PH14 committee. I'm going to say that's a standard.
I know it's just a number, but
So do you want to explain how you as a company are able to be part of standards, but also influence and be part of the answers at the end of it? How does that work?
let me. Generally speaking, most people find standards a boring topic. It's quite a dry topic.
But it's important, isn't it?
It is an important topic, and it's important that people read standards, because at the end of the day, that's what your safety and requirements are minimum to. So globally speaking, there are lots of standards. In America, you have the NFPA. In Europe, we have EN standards, European norms. Britain, we have the BSIF, but we have BSA standards or BS standards.
Yeah.
We have standards in Japan. We have standards in Australia. We have global standards according to ISO.
Are they all different?
Yes, is the answer. But there's also a lot of commonality. So when you think about just the topic of PPE, firefighter PPE, in Europe we talk about EN 469. That's the number. And that particular standard is a minimum standard for a fire suit. Now, when you talk about these standards, it's really important that whomever is procuring fire suits for their people understands the standard, but more importantly, understands that it's a minimum standard. Now, in the UK, we can say, you know what, that's good, but we might want to set a higher level of performance. And it may not be to do with heat and flame. So we may say, we want a high level of performance for abrasion. And you say, well, why? Well, we want our garments to last longer. Or so whatever it is incumbent on the end user to understand the standard well enough to say, this is a minimum standard, whatever standard they use, part of their risk assessment, and then to say, where do we want to use that standard to set above it for performance? And that performance can be in different areas depending on how you see your individual risk.
Okay.
In the UK, of course, we still continue to use as the basis of our standard. We haven't diverged away from the European norm of EN 469.
Okay. So you described that beautifully. Thank you for that. So in terms of your world, Chris, standards, are you on any standards groups? Are you part of those influences?
No, as Tim said, they're quite a dry subject, and I've steered well clear.
Okay, so you like to spend your time differently. But when you were in service, that standard, that EN 469, was that kind of in the back of your head when you were doing your job? You were an FCC role, presumably.
Yeah, I was, Of course, I'm aware of the standards, and there were technical officers that worked to me that knew the ins and outs of those standards. But the point I would make about standards is it's very dependent on who's sitting on those standards committees, because if it's too heavily weighted towards the supplier, then it's open to, dare I say, exploitation in terms of the requirement of the standard to actually push a commercial advantage. Whereas until recently, there wasn't a great deal of representation from the end user. That has changed, but it's probably, if I'm being candid, is probably one individual who's sitting on those standards on behalf of the entire sector.
Gosh, that's quite a job then, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's a real single point of failure there. And I think that there should be more representation from end users to really make those standards push the standards in the direction they need to go. As Tim says, they're a basic, the bare minimum, but they really do need greater input from the end user.
Okay, and do you agree with that in terms of wanting to have more on the user side on these committees?
I would. I would just add, though, that when we talk about the minimum standard, if you look at the statistics that are collected by the Home Office in the UK for the last 30 years, there is clear evidence that the injury to firefighters from heat and flame has diminished dramatically for lots of reasons. So you could argue that the standard that we have is doing a good job at providing the minimum to cover that particular risk. The question exists, does that standard then cover the other risks that firefighters have in their PPE? And you would look at risks such as injuries to joints, cut, and so on. So when you start to think in those terms and you look at the statistics, evidence-based thinking, then the design elements from manufacturers and also the specifications driven by the fire brigades should be focusing on literally the graph that goes that way and driving it down that way.
This episode of the Emergency Services Times podcast is sponsored by MSA Safety, proudly supporting emergency services and first responders on the front line. At MSA Safety, protecting first responders isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We work closely with fire and rescue services across the UK to develop and deliver safety solutions designed to meet your ever-evolving needs. That includes MSA Bristol Firefighter PPE, trusted by services across the UK and beyond, shaped through years of collaboration with frontline teams. It also includes our growing investment in innovation and technology, from the connected M1 SCBA modular solution to our agile, fully managed service model that helps keep crews protected and ready to respond. But for us, safety goes beyond equipment. We believe in standing shoulder to shoulder with the people who dedicate their lives to protecting others, whether it's supporting firefighter charities, backing mental health initiatives, or showing up for community events. MSA is proud to be part of the Emergency Services family. To learn more about our work in the UK and how we're supporting first responders every step of the way, visit www.msasafety.com. With MSA Safety, when you go in, we go in with you.
Can we move to talk about inclusion now? So
Okay.
we've talked about standards, and it's very clear in terms of you as suppliers, how you're able to develop your products and the process of that, the partnership, the understanding, the evolution of things as they move forward. But in terms of inclusion, thinking about the kits fitting women, people of different shapes and sizes, different stages of their lives, what evolution do you see in that process in terms of it still fits the standard, but does it fit the people? So, Tim, what's your response to that?
I tell you what, I'd like Chris to say something because he was an operational firefighter.
Yeah.
And so he had to deal with inclusivity. I didn't. I have an answer, but I'd like to hear what Chris has to say, how they internally...
Take my chair.
I'm sorry to throw you to the lines on that one,
Chris,
but yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks, Tim.
I know.
No, inclusivity is, when you talk about contaminants as the thing coming over the horizon, inclusivity, quite rightly, is probably ahead of that, and it needs to be. I mean, I remember being in the service and being astounded by the lack of progress you get from some suppliers in terms of getting kit to fit female firefighters. It was quite shocking, really. And the amount of fire services out there that are putting females into male kit, the best we can get, this is a men's kit, put that on. And it really struck home to me when I sat in on a presentation from Networking for Women in the fire service. And there was a lady at the lectern talking about the impact of that on her career. And it was really quite profound, and it stuck with me. And I remember her talking about standing at the bottom of a 135 ladder, which is the largest ladder for people to put up. And she said, imagine doing that under pressure because you're a female in a male-dominated environment, But just to handicap you that bit further, you've got to do it in ill-fitting kit. The helmet that doesn't quite fit. So when you've got to look up, you're balancing this helmet. So you've not got to be as good as, you've got to be far better than your male colleagues to be able to do it. It's like a professional footballer going out with a pair of cheap trainers rather than the latest football boots. And that really struck. So I think there's a lot of movement in that field. TEXPORT in particular are very good at that side of things in terms of fit for form and not just male, female fit kit. So in terms of inclusivity, really important. I think TEXPORT are probably one of the leaders in that, and Tim can explain some of the studies they've done. It's quite impressive.
Excellent. Well, that's teed you up nicely, Tim. Tell us more.
So let me start by saying that our company is only focused on firefighting PPE. Our CEO is a woman, Nicole Heinemann. Our technical team is dominated by women. So this is not to say because of that we're the experts, but because of that, it's very different if you have women in your team who are much more focused on the issues that surround what is essentially a sticking point for a lot of fire brigades. And recently at a conference in the UK earlier this year, we saw lots of female firefighters coming up on stage saying, my kit doesn't fit, or explaining the problems that they have. Now, over time, the number of female firefighters in the UK fire service, but globally speaking, has increased significantly. So it's not good enough for manufacturers to kick this topic into the long grass. The way we approach fitting and sizing, which is the key issue, and let me be clear, you are not safe as a firefighter if your kit does not fit and it's not comfortable. This is important. So it's really important that every firefighter has boots, gloves, suits, helmets that fit. So you need to approach the topic in an evidence-based way, and that's measurement, right? So instead of talking about male and female, you talk about shape, because we all come in different shapes and sizes. And simply put, you can be narrow at the shoulder and wide at the hips, or you can be wide at the shoulder and narrow at the hips. And an expert manufacturer will be able to make a cutting that will fit those shapes within an amalgamated sizing platform. Sounds simple? It's not. And there's a lot of work that goes behind it. But when you think of the UK Fire Service, in the past, many manufacturers didn't have to really consider this because often there was a size requirement, a height requirement, a gender requirement. That shouldn't matter anymore. We don't live in that time anymore. We live in 2025. We need to approach the topic in an evidence-based way. And it's quite simply put, any company that is invested in the anthropometrics, which is the study of shapes and sizes, will be able to get this right. So going forward, it is commercially important, and this is an important top point, for manufacturers to get this right. And like I said, it's not a case of gender or sex, it's a case of shape.
Okay,
so
it's an interesting point. So you use this phrase fit for form, which I've heard before, and I like that term
anthropomorphic or anthropometric, the measurement of a shape, of a body.
Which is going to be one of my new favourite words. Now, that's fine, but women in particular change over time. So when they get to the end of their careers, sort of late 40s, early 50s, some women may even be older in service, they're going to go through menopause, which presents a completely different way in which your body reacts to things. So how do you deal with that? So that's not about the changing shape, but their body is reacting differently. So how are you able to accommodate that?
That's a good point. To be honest, I've not thought deeply on that point. It's a tricky topic. What I can say, though, is that firefighters aging over time, so men and women, aging over time have different needs. So if you look at younger firefighters, so let's talk about change of shape. All people change shape over time. They change in height, they change in shape. And when you're talking about menopause, I understand that. Having garments that have the ability to change in some way to accommodate, that's important. But you cannot get away from the fact that there are significant changes. You have to then reissue or resupply an appropriate fitting garment. The issue of age is significant because firefighters, when they're younger, if they have an injury, they can often heal much quicker. An older firefighter doesn't. So again, when we come to this topic, and I think it's related, the focus on a fire suit's ability to protect you from joint injuries is probably more important to an older firefighter than a younger firefighter. Because if you injure your knee or your back or your elbow or your wrist, it takes longer for it to heal. So in a younger person, not so much. So this is where, from a PPE point of view, we can be a little bit more focused on what we can do.
Yes. Okay. And so
I don't know if that answers your question directly, but
yes, I mean, I think there's a sense that bodies do change over time, but the point about the women was more about the kind of the breathability and the fabric construct. We had Laura Douglas from the College of Policing here earlier, who's a public order police officer. She was wearing riot gear for us, and she said to me before she came on stage, I am absolutely boiling. I am perimenopausal. I've got layers of flame retardant undergarment. She had her bodysuit on. And then I asked her to stand and talk in front of an audience, which she's not used to. She told me she was absolutely roasting. So, but 10 years ago, we wouldn't have had that conversation. So it just made, that's why I was asking the question about women changing over time.
So now I understand more in detail what you're asking. Yes, breathability is so making garments lighter weight, more breathable is absolutely the goal.
Yeah.
So I think that, you'll see quite clearly, particularly with TEXPORT products, we are leaders in this way of driving the weight and the breathability of the garments in a more positive situation because it is a topic that comes up time and time again. And specifically, when you're talking about females, menopausal, which is a topic I'm not familiar with, but it's something that is being addressed, maybe indirectly, but it is being addressed on that specific point.
All right. So as the shape changes and people go through their career, they're not going to have the same set of PPE from the day they join as a recruit to the day they retire. That's 30 years potentially, and not everybody's doing 30 years. So, Chris, what were you doing with PPE when it came to the end of its life? Did you chuck it in the bin? Did it get recycled? What happened to it?
Obviously, there's a number of different options you've got, but obviously with sustainability in mind, you didn't just chuck it in the bin.
Too. It's another
that has changed. Yeah, it's another one of the key priorities around many fire services are facing. So, no, you would never chuck it in the bin. You'd recycle it. You would.
Is the manufacturer recycling it?
You
could recycle them? What happens if someone sends some kit back to you?
Recycling that goes on, but the issue, I think, to understand again in more totality, we've gone from natural fibers to artificial fibers. If you look at the statistics again, when firefighters in the UK were wearing wool tunics and plastic leggings and cork helmets, firefighter fatalities and injuries were extremely high.
Yeah. Did you wear that in the 80s?
Late 89, so yeah.
Cool.
So with the introduction of fabrics like Nomex and PBI and so forth, and the more technical garments, these injuries and deaths have been driven down, not just from PPE, but all sorts of other factors. But the issue we have, of course, at the end of life with these products, there's some form of recycling or reuse. So the key really is, and maybe this is not the answer people want to hear, it's not so much recycling, but extending the life of garments.
Okay. How do you do that?
Having garments that don't wear out, having garments that are maintained properly. If you buy a fire suit and you wear it out in 3 years because the quality of the material is poor or it's not maintained in a way which makes it last, that's an issue. So from a cost perspective, but also from an environmental perspective, the longer you can keep it in service in a good condition, because it's a high quality product and well maintained. So instead of 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, this is the thinking that has to be in progress.
Okay.
I think that's a really important point that I'd like to get across today, and that is traditionally, I think fire services have heavily focused on the provision of fire kit. I did myself. You looked at the kit, you tried it on. Was it Gucci? Did I look good in this? Did it feel good? And there's an element of importance to that because, if you feel good, you will perform better. So that's not to dismiss that. But I think there's an over-reliance on the provision of the kit rather than the care and maintenance of the kit. And when we talked about contaminants earlier on, that focus needs to be there. And we talk about health and safety as a well-trodden phrase in the fire service. But when you really break that down, there's an over-reliance, in my view, on safety. So it's provision of kit to protect from acute injury on the fire ground. And why wouldn't it be? That's quite understandable. That's where, you'd expect it to be. But when you then bring into play the contaminant risk, and if kit is not decontaminated and cleaned appropriately, then you are subjecting wearers to long latency disease. And there's quite an astounding figure that says for every one person that receives an acute injury, 99 suffer long latency disease. And so where can we have the biggest impact on saving lives and making sure people enjoy their retirement? It's through better cleaning and decontamination of kit. Focus more, not take it away from safety, but evenly distribute it to health and safety. Yeah. And that needs to be a shift from focus on provision to care and maintenance.
Yes, okay. So if Fire Rescue Services in the UK use TEXPORT as the suppliers of their PPE for their firefighters, will they buy it, maintain and look after it themselves, or will you provide a managed service that you take it away, clean it, and look after it?
It's a good question. So, again, I don't want to be long-winded on it. I mean, Chris works as a consultant for Hunter, and Hunter supplies the latest LCO2 decontamination service. What I would say is that as a manufacturer, we give cleaning instructions to fire brigades, and they can maintain and clean their garments. I would challenge this and say that it's not necessarily consistent across different brigades, and there is a risk or liability, particularly now that there is an awareness of a further risk through contamination and potentially the associated health concerns. So the question that each fire brigade has to ask, am I addressing my risks and liability doing it myself? And can I be accountable for that? Or do I then put it to an expert outside supplier, such as Hunter Apparel, who is not just cleaning the garments, but they're decontaminating the garments and then putting that to a standard that can be acceptable as a way of reducing the risk. So it's a risk assessment. And each fire brigade, look, small fire brigades may not have the ability to do that. Yeah. But, if you think it through, if you don't do it properly, then you are putting yourself open to a challenge.
Yes.
So that's all I would say.
All right. So we've gone through quite a few topics there in our 40 minutes so far. Talking about contaminants, talking about partnership, about standards, innovation, R&D, inclusivity. So let's see if our audience has any questions for us.
Hi, yeah, Teresa, Hereford and Worcester Fire and Rescue. I suppose just around the question of the balance of those considerations. So with contaminants, we're looking at washing more because we want to obviously keep clean. So that's leading to needing potentially looking at more pool stock because to enable us to keep changing the fire kit as often as we need. But the balance of that with then saying we need fit to form and for everything to be perfectly fitting to individuals. And that doesn't seem to align well with the need for greater quantities of fire kit to be available for people to use. And I don't know there's an answer to that, but that's a challenge that we're trying to work out, well, what is the best solution going forward to the best offering we can do for us crews?
Oh, gosh. I've thought about this topic a lot, and I've been to enough conferences. So the AFAC last year, this topic came up, and New South Wales has a pool stock system with a very big area to deal with. And the same issues that you just talked about, fit to form, making sure that even the most diverse firefighters have a properly fitting fire suit. The answer is there is no easy answer. Their system is in play and apparently it's doing well, whatever that means. The answer is it's not going to be something that you can just cobble together. If in a large fire service, those two risks, the risk of contamination and making sure the kit is decontaminated and clean, is clear. The risk of a diverse fire force not having the right sized clothing is an issue because both present liabilities to the management of the fire service. So you have to address both risks. There is a solution. It just has to be thought through. I think that part of the solution is understanding, again, evidence, statistics. If you have 1,000 firefighters and you have a bell curve of, the majority of firefighters are going to fit within that pool stock, you're going to have a small group here and a small group there. Maybe you deal with them in two different ways. And I think that's, you've got to think in a split way, I think. Chris?
I mean, I would come at it at a slightly different angle, and I would say one of the phrases I used as a principal officer was, how do I assure myself, ... So my question to you would be, how do you assure yourself, as a Hereford and Worcester Fire and Rescue Service, that your laundry and decontamination processes are fit for purpose? Because we all know the garments are technical, and we know the problems with excessive water washing at high temperatures that shrink the garments, erode the technical capabilities of that garment. So you need to be challenging your laundry providers to say, well, look, there's a conflict here, there's a contaminants issue, we need to regularly launder the kit, but overwashing at high temperatures with industrial detergents is having a major impact on the quality and the longevity of that equipment. The quick answer for me is stop water washing, because as I say, they're technical garments. In the middle of the tunic and the leggings is a membrane. The membrane's job is to repel water, keep it water resistant, and we're trying to launder and clean garments with a process that is hydroscopic. And so you're not going, if you look at the NFPA data, they will say that water washing at high temperatures with industrial detergents, you're getting as much as, the maximum you're getting is 45% of the contaminant out of that garment. So one, that's not very good, because there's still 55% left in that garment. So the alternative to that would be liquid carbon dioxide cleaning. Whereas liquid carbon LCO2 plus, there are two different sorts of LCO2 process. The most recent one, the most advanced one, LCO2 plus, will remove up to 99% of the decontaminant from your garments. The benefit of that is no water is involved, so you don't get the shrinkage, you don't get the long drying times. Long drying times mean slower turnaround, which means greater pull stock requirement. So LCO2 has an ability to make your garments cleaner, better decontaminated, turned around quicker.
Just like the issue of, the turnaround, obviously, if you can have the solution locally, I guess. But if you've still got to send it away for LCO2, then most of the time is in the getting it there, getting it back. There's still that issue. You're still going to need some pull stock to. Yeah,
but you are sending garments away for cleaning anyway, so you're going to always have that geographical issue. But you're quite right. The more local it is, then you really will reap all of the benefits of LCO2.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, if it's not local, you can still achieve benefits, because you'll get, once it's gone in the machine, an hour it's turned around, it's on its way back to you, but there's no water involved, you don't get the shrinkage, and you don't get the impact on the garments that you get from regular water washing. So your kit will last you longer.
Okay, Chris, thank you for that. Did you want to just add anything more to that?
A quick one. I don't know if you're doing a pull stock or two garment type of issue, but maybe what you do is a pull stock for most people and then do a two garment issue for the special measures, so to speak. I'm sorry, but but you know what I mean? It's because otherwise you can't do, if that is the issue, then you can literally, the large, the mediums and all that kind of thing in the middle there of a bell curve you can do. So probably maybe the small percentage of people that require their garments, you do a two garment issue and a pull stock issue and split it.
Mike Gibson from Scottish Fire and Rescue. So something that we've all identified is that we're looking to get to the point where fit for form is the norm. We're looking to get on top of new and emerging risks, contaminants, inclusivity. Do we need to turn something that we don't talk about enough, I think, is technology, as in compliance-wise, are we aware of where our garments are and when? Is that something that we should look at rather than just the actual fabrics, the contaminants, etc.? Should we actually, because we have 13,000 garments out there in ops plus about 5,000 in reserve. Now, if you look at that without a proper compliance process in place, are those garments in the right place at the right time, or should our focus be towards that technology rather than just the manufacturing side?
So within our garments, we have an RFID, or you can have a barcoding system. I think what you're kind of describing is a track and trace is essential for the garment to know exactly what's happening to it. So simply put, if you have a system of track and trace, you can then implement your own system of understanding where the garment is, what's happened to it, and who's been using it. So I think that's simply part of the answer that you're looking for. As a manufacturer, we do that, and we can supply that, and we can perhaps discuss further on that topic. Chris?
Yes, is the answer. You should be focusing on those technologies. Compliance and regulation, extremely important for a public sector. So you need to be able to assure yourselves that you're doing the right things for your end users. So yeah, definitely understand the life of that garment, what it's been through. Is it still fit for purpose? Are you complying with the new ISO standard 23616 around cleaning and decontamination repair? If not, that's the sort of thing you should be looking at. And track and trace and understanding when garments are end of life forms part of that standard, and you should be on top of that. So any technology that helps you do that, I would say embrace.
100%.
Fantastic. So we have been through a lot of topics. This is very impressive for 45 minutes. Lots of really interesting conversation. I've learnt a lot. I'm really glad we were able to have this conversation, talk about requirements and challenges, because there is a lot of challenge. It is a good year to be doing this with the NFCC procurement happening. We did the stage last year specifically with Brett, actually.
Yeah.
So we're great. I'm very happy that we can facilitate the conversations here at the show. Thank you to TEXPORT for sponsoring the stage and for being this fascinating session. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for listening. Remember that by taking time to learn from our speakers, you can earn CPD points from our partner CPDme. So do check out the link in the show notes. Our thanks to MSA Safety for their continued support for our podcast, and to Smart Digital for producing this series. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times.